Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar. We're back after a summer hiatus, nearly 2 months. We've decided to come back early. It feels earlier and earlier every year, but just because we love it. Fourth series, Mark. Fourth series of the Bundesliga Show. You excited?
Yeah, definitely. It's been too long, to be honest, over the summer. I think I mentioned to you before we started today, Rory, that it seems to have been a shorter break this time, although last season was also short. And obviously, I've been doing a couple of videos as well out for the women's football too. So, yeah, but very, very much looking forward to getting back into it. I've been kind of itching to get back. So, yeah, here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight we're just going to kind of bring you up to speed with what's been going on in the summer transfer window to date. We can have a little fun with it, try and do some winners, some mid-range teams, who's been having an underwhelming campaign. So please do, get involved and let us know what you think with our picks. If you disagree, if you agree, anything in between. So yeah, we'll be cracking on with that as our first show of the season. We've got a couple of other pre-season shows. We'll always, of course, be doing our prediction show. The Biggie will have a fantasy draft show before the season starts because we'll be strongly following that again alongside Bully News. And we'll be doing a couple of the new Bundesliga teams or kind of welcoming them and doing a bit of a team profile on Darmstadt and Heidenheim. So keep your eyes peeled for all of those to come before the season even starts. Obviously, before we do get a crack in, as per usual, smash a like on the video, the first of the 23-24 season. Comment along live, whether you're new, returning, just so I can see Balin getting involved as well. Welcome back, Balin. I hope you're doing well. And of course, press the red button to subscribe. We are on the journey to 1K subscribers on YouTube. Be really, really thankful if you can get us up there nice and early into the season. We can really shoot forwards throughout the season. Really have an enjoyable season with the fantastic community that we keep on growing. Shout out again just before we get started to our delightful partners who will be joining us again this season in the shape of Bundesliga boxes. And of course, not forgetting Bully News as well. So thank you to your continued support, guys. And we will go strong into this season. Right then, Mark. So, I mean, it's been a hard summer to keep a track of all the business because there's been a lot, really, hasn't there? Considering we've still got a long way to go. Feels like clubs have been really, really busy early on. There's some big moves at the start of June. I think we can still predict there's going to be a lot of movement even after this show. So obviously, as the season gets underway, we'll keep you up to date with what's going on. We'll probably use the fantasy shows as well. So before we get into the winners, the underwhelming, and kind of anything else like that, is there any move straight away, Mark, that you look at and just think, wow, or have you been unimpressed with certain moves as well?
Yeah, I think a bit of a mixture, really. I think obviously one of the first points is the decimation, really, of RB Leipzig. I think a couple of nobody was really talking about Szoboszlai leaving, and that kind of came out of the blue, really, a little bit when he made a big money move to Liverpool, which seemed to happen really fast, didn't it? Like a lot of these moves are often drawn out and they take weeks to go ahead, but that one just seemed to happen so fast, really. That one was a bit disappointing for Bundesliga fans. Obviously 70 million euros they got for him, which is still pretty good. Obviously joining Nkunku, leaving, and potentially Gvardiol as well. I think that would be classified as pretty much decimation, really, for RB Leipzig. But obviously, as they always do, they've also made quite a few big moves as well, which we'll talk about later as well. Mm-hmm. But I think, obviously, Jude Bellingham leaving the league as well for 103 million euros was a big talking point. But in terms of incomings, I think, again, Bayern Munich signing Kim Min-jae is a really good signing. He was rated as one of the best players in Serie A for that brilliant Napoli side last year, who won the league and went pretty deep into the Champions League too. I think he's got to be considered a great signing for that Bayern Munich defense, which wasn't really that good for the two preceding seasons, in my opinion. Yeah, I think other signings, I mean, obviously it's Xhaka has got to be considered a good signing that came in from Leverkusen to Arsenal. Not always the most highly rated player for Arsenal, but he had to be considered a good player. Was a mainstay in that Arsenal side for, 6 or 7 seasons and played a big part in their title challenge side last year as well. So quite a lot of big moves, but also a lot of outgoings as well in the league this year.
Yeah, and I think we often obviously have our chats outside the show and we say it's such a shame to lose a lot of the big players in the Bundesliga, Jude Bellingham and Kunku. If Gvardiol goes, see Diaby going. We've just been talking about that in the last few days. Obviously, it's disappointing for the league, and but on the other side of it, it just goes to show the talent that comes through the Bundesliga all the time. And I think me and Mark are absolutely in no doubt that we're buzzing to see who the new superstars are going to be this season, who steps up, what teams step up. Some of the signings that we're going to talk about, some of them might flop, some of them where me and Mark think, they're going to be, underwhelming. They'll probably come up and smash it and be top goal scorer. Honestly, genuinely never know, but that's why we want to kind of talk about it, just to make you all aware of the, all the movings, the ins and outs that we have seen so far. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and split up into 3 categories this evening, and we're going to go with some, the winners of the market so far, the more underwhelming performers in the market, and then kind of all the other teams are in that mid-range category. Myself and Mark will kind of just go through the 18 Bundesliga teams and kind of just vouch what we think has been impressive about them or not so impressive. So we'll start on a positive note. So we'll go with the winners we think so far in this transfer market that we've seen so far. And I'll get us kick started. So I think it's something that you've already slightly touched on, Mark, but I still consider Leverkusen as winners so far in this transfer market. Absolutely, we have to kind of throw in the caveat. Really disappointing to lose Diaby to Aston Villa. A signing that had been gathering pace in the last few weeks. It looked like obviously a Saudi club wanted to come in for him as well. But yeah, just disappointing in the end, because with the signings that have come in, I thought Leverkusen were going to be, they could have done anything. And we're not going to use the show to, do our predictions, because we'll do that in a few weeks' time. But, they were looking really strong from a squad point of view. But anyway, so they brought in this really exciting right back, Arthur, Brazilian right back, who, again, it kind of looks like he's being brought in as maybe a Jeremy Frimpong replacement, Mark. I'm not too sure about that, but that's a really good cover if they can keep a hold of Frimpong. You wouldn't have thought that Leverkusen necessarily need the money now that they've done the sale of Diaby. So that's an interesting one. Grimaldo, been lots of chat about him. So an exciting addition, replacing Mitchell Bakker, who's been moved on. 27 years old, good profile, very technical, will add assists, no doubt, to the Leverkusen side. So that's something definitely to look at. Obviously, you've already mentioned Xhaka, Mark, from Arsenal, high-profile player. He's actually a lot younger than I thought, Xhaka. He's been around for ages, though. So that kind of strikes me as being, very smart business, adds that steel, experience, the midfield, will help Leverkusen keep a hold of the ball as well. They're a very speedy team. They can play on the counter, they can rip teams apart, but maybe in those bigger games where you need to retain the ball, I think Granit Xhaka should be a good signing. But I mean, obviously looking at a top signing and one to weaken another Bundesliga side, getting Jonas Hoffmann in, great signing for me, surely. Taking that from Gladbach guarantees you Bundesliga goals and assists, top performer for Gladbach for a number of years. he's not a direct replacement for, say, a Diaby, but when you're losing a player like that and you've got Hoffman coming in, I think that's really, really sound business. And then another recent signing for Leverkusen is Victor Boniface. He's obviously come in. Looks like a bit of a Paddy Schick replacement, we think, Mark, because of the injury to keep Schick on the sidelines for a little while. He's coming in with, some good stats from goal scoring point of view. Time will tell how he goes and how Xabi Alonso chooses to use him. But definite winners, in my opinion. Are you thinking that Leverkusen are going to look strong with those signings?
Yeah, I think especially in midfield, as you mentioned, Xhaka and Hoffman are amazing signings. I mean, obviously, sometimes Hoffman plays a bit further forward as well, but he's just a quality Bundesliga player and another signing that just came out of the blue, really, for Leverkusen. And at the time when they pulled that off and Xhaka, I was thinking, Leverkusen could even be title challengers. Mm-hmm. But obviously, since then, we've heard the news that Schick could potentially be facing a long layoff. And also, obviously, the unfortunate news that Moussa Diaby left as well. They got a good amount of money from him, 55 million euros to the ambitious Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Is I think good business for Leverkusen, but also good business for Villa as well. And he was always one of my favorite players in the Bundesliga, so I'm sad to see him leave. But yeah, there's no doubt that this looks like a quality roster that they've managed to put together. I mean, the only problem is if Schick is injured, then they're going to be relying on Boniface to really kind of come good and get the kind of goals that he was able to do in Belgium last season. But, the Bundesliga is a big step up from Belgium. But I'm particularly excited about Hoffman and Xhaka. I just think that's a real quality pair of signings. Grimaldo as well. I think Xabi Alonso said that he really, really wanted Grimaldo. He was really keen on signing him. He got his man from Benfica, and that's a big coup at the end of the day because, he's worth 25 million euros in market value and he came on a free. So that's, he's going to retain his value even if he stays for a year or two and then wants to leave. So, yeah, really good signing there. I think, there's a lot to be positive about. I mean, the fact that they kept Xabi Alonso as well is a big thing because, he's been very, very highly rated, had a really, really good start to his career at Bayer Leverkusen. And, they're going to be looking at top four. We're not going to turn this into a prediction show, but top four should be minimum for them looking at that squad, even with the loss of Moussa Diaby.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so another team. Do you want to pick out another team that you think has been a winner so far in this market?
Yeah, for me, actually, the team, the big winners, actually, I was saying to you, Rory, before, and it's the men from the east of Berlin. Again, it's Union Berlin. I just think the window they've done so far is ridiculously good. I mean, we all know that more money is in the club because of the Champions League. It's a club that's going from strength to strength in general, but I didn't imagine that they'd be able to get some of the quality they have done so far. I mean, first point is Diogo Leite signed on a permanent from Porto. He was one of the players of the Bundesliga season last year. They managed to get him in for just 7.5 million euros when his market value is 15 million. So great signing there, only 24 years old. I just think the cheekiest and one of my favorite signings of the season was the signing of Lucas Toussaint as well from Hertha Berlin. I just think, I think we mentioned he was Hertha's best player by a distance last season. He was superb for the West Berliners despite their relegation, and to pick him up for 3 million is just wow. It's a really good piece of business, and also kind of antagonizing the blue and whites as well at the same time. I think that's a classic Union Berlin bit of business there, but really good signing. This is a guy, Toussaint, who's been linked with like real top clubs in Europe before. And, I think he's still got a lot to give in the Bundesliga in a better team in Union Berlin. I also think some of the loan signings he made as well, like Fofana from Chelsea, they're just 20 years old, but we know that obviously they were lacking a top goal scorer after Awani left. Obviously, Jordan didn't really do it in terms of goals, but they managed to get him on loan. He's only 20, but I think they've kind of brought him in the same model as Awani a few years ago when he joined from Liverpool. And I think, another potential of a real top striker there. Again, we've got to see. He's one of them that could go one or two ways. There's no guarantee that he's going to be top quality. But I mean, he is the kind of player that could go and hit the ground running and get 15 goals next season. And I think, again, one for the American fans out there, Brendan Aronson as well, on loan, market value of 25 million euros. Not bad for Union Berlin to get that caliber of player in. I mean, you know, he didn't do that well for Leeds last year, but at the end of the day, he was playing in a poor Leeds side. And he is a player that's very highly rated, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in a Bundesliga, which I think will probably suit him a little bit better. You know, the 22-year-old, he's one of the signings of the season, really. And even Alex Kral as well, you know, the loan signing from Spartak Moscow, but obviously he played at Schalke for most of last season and was really good in the second half. He looked like a quality defensive midfielder, and it's all smart business. You know, it's an upgrade on some of the guys that they had previously. It's players that, you know, could probably have gone and played for bigger, more kind of well-renowned names, but they've all chosen Union Berlin just because of the story, just because of what they're building in the east part of Berlin.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think very good business. You know, they're going to need squad depth as well with, you know, the fact that they're in the Champions League. They're going to need that squad to rely on. They've also brought in a young striker who's quite a good prospect, Kaufmann, who had a pretty solid season with Karlsruhe last season. So he looks capable of maybe going to the next level. Obviously, he'll need time. Again, just smart business. Obviously, loaning out Luerling as well to Stuttgart, who, you know, we'll kind of come on to in a little bit. Strikes me as good business. Getting him, you know, a lot more Bundesliga minutes under his belt. Hasn't quite struck, didn't do it as much last season. Obviously, they've released Gieselman as well, which I thought was a bit of a shame, but maybe, again, just an age profile thing. But yeah, as I say, I agree. I think Union have had a really, really good summer so far. And, you know, Fofana coming in, Aronson coming in, hopefully just takes a bit of pressure off Geraldo Becker, should they keep him, in terms of getting those goals, because, you know, a great deal of their attacking from last season was pretty much relying on him scoring, or Kevin Behrens, I suppose, who did come to the show a little bit. Right, a couple other teams maybe to just touch on who are kind of maybe squeezing into the winners or mid-range category, and, you know, shout up if you disagree with us in these ones, and I'm sure Mark might back me down on a few of them as well. I think Frankfurt have done okay as well this summer. We were kind of talking about it off air just before we went live, especially given the fact that everyone knew Ndicka was going, Kamada was going, and Glasner was going before the season was, you know, far from done. I think they've made, 3 loan signings that have now become permanent. So in the shape of, I mean, Knauf had that brilliant run of form, didn't he, in the Europa League? He was fantastic at, right wing back, and the form did drop off, unfortunately, but I think there's still a player in there. And Bimbe from PSG, he came in with another good profile, had an okay season, but gets forward really well. And Max as well has been made permanent signing. So again, players who can, you know, get crosses in and provide, I think that's good options for them. Look at Robin Koch, who's come in from Leeds on loan. I think that's, you know, a solid addition to the back line if you're looking at obviously the loss of Ndicka. There's also a young, talented centre-back who they signed, William Pacho. We don't know an awful lot about him, but kind of shaped in the mould of maybe replacing Ndicka in the years to come. But obviously, only at 21 years old, lots of room to grow into that position. And, you know, hopefully will do well at the club. Then I think there's two really interesting ones. I think the standout one has to be Skihiri, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Coming in from Cologne, you know, just did everything for them from a midfield point of view, broke up play, wins the ball back, got forward, scored their goals. And if you, add him into a Frankfurt midfield, I think that is lovely depth, lovely kind of mix that you'll have there in that midfield. So definitely a standout signing for me. And there's also a lot around this Swedish midfielder that they've signed as well, Mark, Hugo Larsson. I think they beat quite a lot of teams to him. So I think that's, again, really big one for the club. Young midfielder, really highly thought of. He's already got a Swedish cap, international cap at age 18. We might not see loads of him, but it will be interesting to see how he maybe settles in into the fold as well. So, yeah, for me, Frankfurt, I think have done really well considering, as we already know, Ndeka and Kamada already went. And it looks like Kamada's moved to AC Milan, which looked like it was done and dusted, has actually fallen through. So he's actually a free agent. And I don't think he wants to stay in the Bundesliga. It'd be interesting to see if a Bundesliga team maybe went for him, because obviously there's a quality player in there. Any other shouts on Frankfurt, Mark, before we move on to maybe a couple of others?
Yeah, I think Marmoush as well. Marmoush, he's a very funny player, Marmoush, because at times when you see him on the ball, he looks like a real top player, doesn't he? Like he's always kind of industrious. He always looks like he's going to be testing defenders, but there's just something missing in there. So far from what we've seen of his time at Stuttgart and then Wolfsburg, obviously last season. But you always got the feeling that there was a player in there with him, and on a free transfer, it's not a bad signing, really. I think he's more of a gamble than anything. I don't think they're going to be expecting him to bang in like 15, 20 goals next season. For me, a lot for them depends on whether they can keep Muani, though, because obviously so far they've kept him. And obviously Bayern Munich, which we'll talk about probably more a bit later, if they do get Kane, then you've got to question who is going to take him, really, Muani, because I think Aussie men, that would mean Aussie men would be staying at Napoli. They've also been linked with him, and whether Premier League teams would quite be ready yet to take a gamble on him, because he's only had one season at a high level at the end of the day. So I'm not sure. So maybe there is still a chance that Muani could end up staying at Frankfurt. I mean, if they had him with those players, then I think they could be top 4 challengers again. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they have lost Ndeka, who was one of the best defenders in the league. Kamada, although you've got to remember that Kamada didn't finish the season well at all last year, and he almost kind of gave up in a way, let's be honest, which was a bit disappointing. They've also lost Almami Toure as well, who was a regular starter for them.
Yeah.
But in general, I mean, they've made an absolute plethora of signings. I agree with you that I think Mbimbe as well, you forgot about him. He also was on loan. I think he was decent too from Paris Saint-Germain. They brought him in for 6.5 million, which is a decent. He's a player that could go to a higher level, a player that could start playing better for Frankfurt. I think probably Ngankam. Some people have actually talked up the signing of him, but he just did nothing for me really at Hertha Berlin last year. He's another one that's kind of been linked. Like he's been rated for a number of years, but for me, he's just not really a Bundesliga standard player. But again, he's a gamble sign, a bit like what Goetze was last year. Everyone thought Goetze, he's absolutely finished, but he had specifically in the first half of the season, he was really good for them. So. Fair play to Frankfurt. They tried to rebuild, and a lot of people didn't know whether the money was really there for them. But I agree that the Shaqiri is one of the signings of the season as well. Like, he's a fantastic player. One of the best players over the last 2-3 years in the Bundesliga, especially in midfield, and he's going to really, really be a good player. I think Robin Koch, what he can do, I don't know, because he wasn't really rated in the Premier League, but before he left the Premier League, he was really highly rated when he was at Freiburg. Yeah. So we'll have to see if he can kind of rediscover his form. You've got to remember he was playing in a poor Leeds team the last 2 years. So at the end of the day, it's not always easy to show your best side when you're playing in a poor side like that. So, he's going to have the chance to play in a top 6 team really in this Frankfurt team, and hopefully he can deliver some better form, the German international.
Yeah, agreed. So I think they really were a kind of three-ish teams that we think were clear winners so far. Obviously, then we've got some mid-range teams, which we'll go through in a minute. But we're now going to move on to teams that we think have maybe had a bit of an underwhelming market so far. And again, please feel free to agree or disagree as much as you want. We're just kind of spitballing whilst giving you all the details of who has actually signed who. So we'll just start with an easy one, which fortunately is Mönchengladbach. A side who have just been stripped bare. If we talk about, knowing clubs where everyone knew that players were leaving before the end of the season, we've mentioned Frankfurt, but how well they've, recruited since then. Gladbach clearly have lost Benzbaini to Dortmund. That was a long time coming. Jonas Hoffmann, I think, just felt like a massive shock to the club in terms of losing him to Leverkusen. We knew that Stindl, obviously from an age profile, would eventually move on. But he was still a great servant to the club and still scored goals to them. Marcus Thuram leaving on a free, absolutely not a shambles, but it's not good business, is it? Let's put it that way. But when you think about it, those 4 players that I've just named off the bat there, it's just, it strips their attacking options very quickly. Stindl, Thuram, Benzbaini produced, goals and assists, scored. He took their penalties often as well, didn't he? So yeah, if you look at that, strong links already with Nico Elvedi going to Wolves, I think it is off the top of my head, but they have lined up a replacement in the shape of Maximilian Wöber from Leeds, again, because they've been relegated. They're offloading quite a lot of players, Leeds. So yeah, if they can do that business quickly, then great. But yeah, it's tricky for Gladbach, I think, Mark, because a lot of people are now penning them to have a really bad season ahead, and they might struggle. And mid-table mediocrity might be like a great achievement for them potentially. But I think their recruitment, to me, obviously, there are certain names that aren't so familiar with the Bundesliga, but I still think they've done an okay job of trying to rebuild. I know you're not so convinced on this one, to be fair, but just reel off the names just for people to know. So they brought in a young forward from Bayern in the shape of Ranos. I think he's got quite a good reputation for him. So maybe being able to step up. Obviously, you've got Robin Hack as well, Bielefeld player, former Bielefeld player. Who has showed glimpses at Bundesliga level. Obviously, he'll have to show a lot more steady levels and consistency in that shape. The 2 big ones, obviously, from an attacking point of view, are the signings of Honorat from a French side. Mark, I think you remember who they signed him from?
Brest. It was.
Brest, that was it, yeah. And then Kavankara as well, who I think has scored already for the club in a pre-season friendly. So again, when you look at their profiles, they have scored goals in the leagues that they've played in, but it's a tricky one to come in and hit the ground running. If they do, then there's a good chance that Gladbach will be absolutely fine. They've also, one thing to note, and it might not be a player that has a huge role to play this season, but they did make quite a decent signing in terms of a youth prospect from Werder Bremen. I think his name is Chia Rodia, Chiarodia. Quite highly thought of in the German ranks. So yeah, interesting one. If he plays much this season, we'll have to see. But yeah, just very quickly on Gladbach, Mark, because I'm conscious of time as per. So I think it's probably looking like Gladbach will struggle, and maybe mid-table will be, good for Seoane in his first season with Gladbach.
Yeah, I'm really worried about them, to be honest. Yeah, as you mentioned, 4 key players leaving the club, and probably the 3 best players, if you think about it, Benzbaini, Hofmann and Thuram. I think few would disagree that they were the best 3 players for the last few years. And, I think the other problem for them is that Kone is injured as well, and they think he could be out for quite a while, and he's probably their best remaining midfielder. So they're really, really relying on some of these new signings to hit the ground running. My only fear, just without sounding too much of a stato, like looking at that signing of Kvankara, the Czech striker, like they signed him for 10.5 million, but his market value is only 4 million, which is like normally when you look at Transfer Market, which by the way is a really good website for transfers, it tells you the market value and how much they paid. Like normally clubs, especially Bundesliga clubs, they pay a lot less than the market value. Like often they get really good deals, Bundesliga clubs, but this is one of the few where a few transfers this season where the amount of money paid is way, way higher than the market value. So to me, that is a little bit worrying. So clearly the people that do the statistics for transfer market don't particularly rate the young man. But yeah, it's we'll have to see. I mean, it doesn't always work out that way. But I do fear for Gladbach. I just really do. But there is some hope there. The likes of Robin Hack could come good. I've seen him play at Nuremberg. Fantastic player. And last year, despite Bielefeld's relegation, he got I think 12 goals and 12 assists in a poor side. So he is a good player, but I just hope he can do it in the Bundesliga because trust me, he is a player who could really kind of come good. I do believe that, Robin Hack. So that there is still hope for Gladbach. And, they still do have a relatively solid base in that side that should be good enough to keep them up. But we'll have to see, I suppose. Moving on to another team that I think have had a poor window. I didn't mention these guys to you before when we were talking, Rory, but it's got to be FC Köln, the rivals of Gladbach, FC Köln, because I mean, they've lost Shaqiri, who was by far and away their standout player. He was their top man. The other problem for them is that they lost to Jonas Hector to an early retirement at the age of 32 as well, citing that he was ready for a new challenge. And they would have been hoping they could have got another couple of years out of the excellent ex-German international, who was a very, very good player even towards the back end of his career. So for me, they were their best two players, I'll be honest with you. I think Shaqiri and Hector, they were the leaders, the real quality in that side. And for the only guy they brought in for a fee so far is Chabot, who they actually had last season as well, who again looks a decent piece of business for $2.5 million. He was quite good last year. They have brought a few frees in, but none of them are overly exciting. I think probably the most exciting is Pacarada from St. Pauli, the left back. He was quite highly rated for the Hamburg side last year. They brought another defensive midfielder in from Nordsjælland as well in Denmark, but I can't profess to knowing that much about him. But and also they did get Luca Waldschmidt as well, who it seems about 10 years since he last had a decent season, to be honest. But they're going to be hoping for him to add to Davy Selke to get the goals next year, aren't they? But yeah, I just think I absolutely love Stefan Baumgart. He's one of the best managers in the league, and they're really going to be looking to him to try and fire up his troops and get a tune out of this roster this year, because I'm going to be honest with you, it's one of the weakest sides in the league. And I think Shaqiri and Hector kind of held it together last year. And unless they can get some good signs in, I'm a little bit worried about them, Rory. What do you think? Is it for good reason, or do you think I'm over-exaggerating FC Köln's problems at the moment?
No, I had them on my list, actually. And yeah, I can't profess to know many of the people that they brought in. They've also let Duda go as well. I know he didn't really play last season. I think he was on loan, wasn't he? But, he's a player who can score a goal and was okay a couple seasons ago. And yeah, as you say, the players that they brought in, Chabot, being made permanent is a good bit of business. But yeah, I think there could be a season of struggle perhaps for Köln as well. And then, there are some other underwhelming markets so far. And again, this is tricky one to kind of cover, because we don't want to kind of just target teams before the season starts, and we don't want to start on a negative context at all. But there has been lots of chat potentially about how Dortmund are shaping up for next season. And it's not really in terms of putting them into underwhelming, because what do you do when you lose a player like Jude Bellingham? It's so hard to replace that talent. And they've kind of just gone like for like, really. They've lost two players. They've lost Bellingham and they've lost Guerrero. They were always going to bring in Bensebaini, so that's kind of sound. I think that's covered. And then in terms of replacing Bellingham, they've also obviously brought in Nemetcha from Wolfsburg, who has come with not a lot of fan favoritism in regards to some of his beliefs from a religious point of view, and a couple of tweets that he made previously. But obviously the club believe in him as a player and have brought him in. There's no doubt that they can get something out of him. He's talented player. I think Wolfsburg would be pleased to get the amount of money that they did out of him. But if you kind of paused it there, then you're thinking 2 for 2, and you're kind of downgrading on the Bellingham replacement. But now the fact that they've brought in Marcel Sabitzer from Bayern, obviously, I think from a Bayern point of view, not someone that they were desperate to keep a hold of. They didn't need to keep a hold of him. Obviously, he's on loan at Man United for the last half of last season. But I think that's a really smart move. And I think it'll boost the options that Dortmund have. So, yeah, I think the fact that Dortmund have only really lost Bellingham, there's no reason why they won't be back up there challenging for the title. It's a shame that the saga in terms of getting Alvarez didn't work out. That's a player that they were long linked with. They've also let Modeste go at the end of his contract, which obviously made sense. So I think there's quite a lot of players that I'm quite excited to see as well. Duranville could be a player that we see a lot more of. Seeing the likes of Marlon and Adeyemi grow as well as players would be really exciting. So, yeah, not necessarily underwhelming, but just a tricky one to replace such a big player for Dortmund in that sense. Mark, do you just quickly on Dortmund, fair enough to say there's just one of those things when a player comes around like Bellingham, it's just impossible to replace him, like the Bayern and Lewandowski thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they were never going to get a like-for-like standard replacement. You know, probably one of the top 5 central midfielders in the world now, really, Jude Bellingham. They got a great deal for him, 103 million euros. But at the end of the day, like, I think it was just a shock when they first went for Felix Nemecha. I think people were just like, really? Are you serious? That's going to be the replacement for one of the best midfielders in the world. But I think the Sabitzer signing has kind of steadied the ship a little bit now because, he's a man that knows the Bundesliga. He is a very good player. Obviously at Leipzig was one of the leading lights in the Bundesliga. Didn't quite do it for Bayern, but I always thought it was a little bit hard done. But I don't think he was bad for Bayern by any means. I think he was relative, but obviously Bayern Munich are just so good in that area, that central midfield area, and I think he couldn't quite fight his way in there. Although I think at the beginning of last season he did start most of the games, but didn't follow that into the second half of the season when he was loaned out to Man United and did. Yeah, okay, I would say, but it was a new league for him in a side that, Rory, I'm sure, a relatively mediocre United side overall, but still, it's. But anyway, I think for Dortmund, it's more about keeping players. They kept Emre Can, who was brilliant last season. A lot of people thought he would leave. I still think Benzabaini is possibly an upgrade on Guerrero overall, too, because his defensive work's better and he still gets forward and gets goals and assists. He's not quite as good with the ball at his feet as Guerrero was, but for me, that's a relatively like-for-like standard. I don't think they've lost that much there, to be honest. It's mainly just the loss of Bellingham and who can come in and replace him. Whether Sabitzer will be that man or whether it will even be Nemecha who kind of steps up there, but it's going to be hard to replace him, and it's whether they can find another way of winning games of football without Jude Bellingham, because, he was the player of the season last year. He was unbelievably good. He is going to be possibly the best midfielder in the world over the next year or two. And I just think you can't really replace that kind of guy. But as you say, there's so much to be positive for with Dortmund. I think the form of Marlon, the back end of last season, that was like a new signing, basically. And I expect him to continue that kind of form this season. As you mentioned, Adeyemi came really, really good in the second half as well. And they have got quality like Bino Gittins and Duranville who are going to come and have big seasons this year as well, I think. So it's by far from doom and gloom for Dortmund, but obviously Bellingham will be a loss. Yeah,
agreed. So we'll kind of come to the teams that we're thinking about a bit of a, okay, not bad, not not great either. And we'll just kind of spin through these teams a bit quicker now. So looking at Augsburg, to be fair, Mark, I think certainly from an attacking point of view, they've done quite well in the market. So Okugawa coming in, Sven Mitchell from Union, who's has his moments off the bench, Tietz, who's come in from Darmstadt as their top goal scorer, absolutely stolen him away. And they've also stolen Patrick Pfeiffer from Darmstadt as well, their best defensive option Making Berisha a permanent signing as well, keeping a hold of him is obviously massive if they can. Bringing in Finn Darman as well as a replacement for Giekewitz. And then finally then kind of getting rid of Ricardo Pepi, who's obviously moved on to PSV. What a saga that was. Shame it didn't work out because he came with such, fanfare. They spent a lot of money on him, and I think they've almost leveled out. I think they maybe made a slight loss on him. But, Augsburg's trying to look a bit more attacking. And the fact that obviously they've taken 2 Darmstadt players, directly impacts a team that are going to be down there with them anyway in that kind of bottom end of the league. It weakens that Darmstadt and it strengthens them. So, they'll be buzzing in that sense. So that's Augsburg quite quickly. Mark, do you want to quickly run through another one of the teams that have been kind of mid-range for you?
Yeah, I think probably another one is Mainz, really. I think Mainz, but they're more on the good side, but not like outstandingly good. Yeah, but I do like the sound of Tom Kraus as well on a permanent from Schalke. I think that's a really good piece of business for Mainz, because he's a player, again, a former FC Nuremberg player too. And he didn't do that well for Schalke last year, but I think there's a lot more to give for him. I do believe he will become like a real good Bundesliga player. He's still only 22. 5 million is a really good piece of business. I also think Sepp Vandenberg as well, on loan from Liverpool. I think he was good the back end of last season for Schalke too. It's interesting that a lot of those Schalke players have found new Bundesliga clubs, which says a lot about how good they were in the second half of the season. Obviously, Maurice Jens getting a good move to Wolfsburg as well. I just think there's been some real interesting to see a lot of those Schalke players from that second half of the season rejoining Bundesliga clubs. But yeah, they're the only real 2 signings that they've made, but I think both of them are quite positive ones for me, which is why I have them in the middle. In terms of outgoings for them, they've lost Ingvartsen, but it's a bit of a loss, but they did get 3 million for him, which is half decent, really, considering he's always been a bit of a bit part player for them. And I think a good piece of outgoing news for them was the sale of Fulgini for 7 million. I mean, he almost didn't play for the club as well. Yeah. I think to get 7 million for a Bundesliga club for a kind of player that spent most of the season on the bench is really, really good business as well. So I think they've made a profit actually this season by quite a long way so far. They're around 5 6 million in profit, and they look like they could even have a stronger squad. So, again, although actually, sorry, one more point I have to make about Mainz as well. They did lose Aaron Martin, which is a really big loss as well. He went to Serie A. Yeah, he's got to be considered a loss because he was a really exciting right back as well. But overall, they're looking good, a good place as well, I would say.
Yeah. I'll pick up one as well, like mid-range or slightly worse than mid-range, maybe Hoffenheim. Obviously, losing Baumgartner to RB Leipzig kind of felt inevitable in the end, but top performer for them, consistent with goals and assists. So that's a huge blow in that sense. Be interested to see if Baumgartner can take his game to the next level with RB Leipzig. Obviously, Angelino didn't really work out, and that's kind of ended anyhow. Dabur's moved on to a Saudi Arabian club. Kasper Dolberg, his loan move never worked out, so that wasn't made permanent. So yeah, you're kind of thinking a bit worried about them scoring goals, but obviously they've brought in Marius Butler from Schalke. So that's, if he can continue his development, his confidence is sky high of scoring goals in that Schalke team. There's no reason why he can't carry on necessarily. They brought in Grilic as well, back from Ajax. Just a Bundesliga player. He knows the league. He knows Hoffenheim. So I think that's a sound signing back. And then just in the last few days today, this afternoon, they've made a pretty good defensive signing in the shape of Shalai. I think a Hungarian centre-back. He should be a really important part of their back line, quite physical, really good in the air as well. So it'd be interesting to see if he can shape up well. A partnership with Ozan Kabak could be quite a strong one actually in the Bundesliga. Yeah. So that could be quite exciting to see. Hoffenheim, again, they shouldn't have really been in a relegation race last season, but just slightly concerned about how many goals they might score if Butler can't quite find his form that he had for Schalke last season. I'll just quickly do one more. I'll go on to my boys, VfB Stuttgart, who have had a fairly positive window. Most of it revolves around how many players they can keep. It looks like the sale of Guirassy could be close, to be honest. I've heard that he's turned down an opportunity from Ajax because he's waiting for a Premier League move. His release clause is only 15 million euros as well. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because Stuttgart only just made him a permanent signing. When they're in the middle of the relegation playoff match with Hamburg, so you're thinking, yeah, great, you've got him now, but he's a player that scored goals and that attracts attention. So there's a good chance that Guirassy moves on. If they keep Souza, Mavropanos, these are all if, buts and maybes, and obviously we'll relate to that when we come to it. But in terms of players that they've brought in, I want to be a bit more positive. Obviously, Woo Young-jong from Freiburg, I think very good business, high energy, will add some more goals that Stuttgart desperately need. When he's had a good run of form for Freiburg, he's been a really good Bundesliga player. Obviously, the loan signing of Lurling from Union Berlin, I think, is just, sound. If he gets a good run of form or run of game time, I think he'll definitely progress and could be a good player for us to fill the gap, considering Thiago Tomas has moved on. They've brought in Mittelstadt as well from Hertha Berlin as a Souza replacement. If not, then good cover to have in the back line. Good solid player. But yeah, that's an interesting one. They've obviously sold Florian Müller as well to Freiburg. Don't know how they managed that, but they managed to get him out the door. And it looks like, obviously, then they're needing a goalkeeper. I think it's pretty much confirmed. It might not be official in the usual channels, but Nubel from Bayern Munich looks to be coming in as their first choice keeper, or to fight it out with Wedlow. But I suspect he'll be the number one goalkeeper for Stuttgart. So that's, bit of a mixed bag. But if Stuttgart can keep on to a couple of those, Mavropanos and Souza particularly, then, it could be slightly better season. Touchwood, we'll have to see. So there, a couple of quick updates in that sense. Mark, do you want to try and finish off with maybe a couple of teams, and then we'll maybe come on to RB and Bayern, because we need to definitely touch on their windows so far.
Yeah, I think Werder Bremen, I think there's only one thing to mention about them. It's the fact they signed Naby Keita on a free transfer. I think that's a really, really good move. But unfortunately, it seems he's already picked up an injury in training, which is really, really unfortunate because, I thought he was going to be an amazing player for them, but there was always that worry about injuries that have kind of plagued his recent career. And I do hope it's not too bad. I've not seen exactly how long it is. We're still 4 weeks away from the season, so hopefully there's enough time to recover in time for the start. But that's not a good start, really. Other than that, they've done nothing, basically. There's been no major stuff at all for them. Only David Kovnatski coming in from Fortuna Dusseldorf on a free as well. Just probably a player that, probably backup. They'll be hoping it's backup for Füllkrug and Dutch as well, because if they lose one of them, then, it could be a problem. But if they keep them two, I think they'll be absolutely fine. But not that much to mention about Werder. I think, probably we've got to mention Wolfsburg as well. We didn't mention them. They brought in, they always make quite a lot of signings, because we know that they're relatively well-heeled, the Wolfsburg club. Probably the main one that they brought in, as I say, I'm impressed with the signing of Moritz Jens on a permanent. I didn't realise he was actually permanently at Lorient in France, actually. I'm not sure why they wanted to get rid of him, because he was a quality, one of my favourite central defenders of the second half of last season for Schalke. Great signing there. They've also brought in Thiago Tomas, which surprised me a little bit, because I'm not sure what you thought, Rory, as a Stuttgart fan, but he never really did that much for me. Apart from like 2 or 3 games over the season, he just looked a bit overrated, to be honest. But they managed to get him, and I'm not really that convinced about that signing, to be honest with you. Again, another player from Czech Republic. It seems to be Czechs are like really in fashion these days in the Bundesliga. A lot of them seem to get signed from the Czech league. They've signed Václav Černý as well from 20 in the Netherlands, and yeah, just a few signings for them. Obviously, the big news about outgoings on their front is Felix Nemec. He left. Also, Mamouche left as well on a free. Also, Paulo Otavio too, which a lot of people haven't talked about. He's gone to Qatar, incredibly. So yeah, he's going to be playing in Asia next year. So he was a key player for them as well in the second half of last season, the left back. So you'd probably say overall they're probably still around the middle kind of level, but more negative than positive, I would say, for them, really, in truth. Who else have we got that we've not mentioned?
We haven't mentioned
Freiburg. Well, very, very little on the Freiburg to mention, apart from obviously the sale of Mark Flecken. He left for Brentford. I think that was done way, way before the start of the season. They're going to promote their young under-21 German keeper is going to be their number one. But they should be in safe hands because he's very, very highly rated, and he's already the German under-21's first choice keeper. So I think he's basically the German James Trafford, basically. So he should be quite good. I think they have brought in Adamu from RB Salzburg. Usually players from RB Salzburg are quite good, aren't they? I mean, they paid 6 million euros for him. So he could potentially provide a backup for Gregorovitz as well. But yeah, they've not lost anyone major apart from Fleck. And obviously they lost Woo Young-jung, but he was only a backup player anyway, so they're not going to be overly concerned about that. But yeah, Rory, do you want to take us through RB Leipzig, who've obviously had a very eventful window?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll finish with RB Leipzig and then Bayern. We're not going to touch too much on Darmstadt or Heidenheim because we've obviously got the profile shows that we're going to be doing in a few weeks' time. And we've already mentioned that Darmstadt unfortunately offloaded or had to offload a couple of their players. So yeah, RB Leipzig, yeah, it's been eventful. Nkunku was gone a long time ago. We know that. That's a big blow. Szoboszlai, as you mentioned, Mark, happened really quickly, but it's only because Liverpool wanted to be able to hit the release clause before it went, before that deadline hit. So they did that very quickly. You can't even, we haven't even mentioned Konrad Laimer. Him to Bayern was a deal done quite a long time ago. Huge blow, really. And yeah, there's a very good chance that Gvardiol goes to City, although there has been a bit of a stall on that, I think. But I think inevitably it will happen. So we'll see on that, but there's a very good chance that RB will be flush for cash when that one goes through, because it looks like it's going to be 100 million euros, roughly speaking. And then their business in terms of bringing players in, I think it's quite exciting, to be fair. Might not be for the long term, because obviously they brought in Fabio Carvalho and Xavi Simons, both on loan from Liverpool and PSG, respectively. But it's just like, what do Leipzig get out of this? Yeah, they get them for a season, but Liverpool aren't going to sell Carvalho to Leipzig. Like, Simons is never going to be signed by Leipzig on a permanent deal. It's going to be way too much money for them. So, yeah, you get them for a season. They might give you a few moments of stardust, which I expect from them. They'll bring goals and assists for sure. But yeah, tricky one that. I think that's interesting. Baumgartner, obviously classy player. That will be good for them at the top end of the pitch. We finally get to see Benjamin Sesko, who we've been waiting for quite a while. I'm really excited to see him actually up front. Really physical, speedy player, the Slovenian. That I can see him doing really well in the league. Obviously, another big one was Openda being signed from Lens or Lens. He's got a really high bar in terms of progression. Capped by Belgium already, 23 years old. He could be one of those players that absolutely storms the league. So I think really excited to see how he gets on. Seawald, who's come in kind of as a replacement for Lima, kind of prototype, coming from the sister club Salzburg. So that's kind of a natural progression in that sense. And then they brought in a young French defender who, again, I guess you say is potentially going to be a Gvardiol replacement, although he's only 18 years old, but he's 6'5" already. So I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name because I'll absolutely butcher it. But yeah, I think he could do well, but it might be a bit too early for him. We'll see how much we see of the Frenchman. But yeah, I'm still excited by Leipzig because they had a good run at the end of last season under Rosa. The players that they brought in should help to bring in that kind of high energy and the way that he wants to play. Yeah, they've been absolutely stripped of high quality players, but I'm also just as excited to see how they get on. And yeah, we'll finish with Bayern then. Mark, I mean, what we've seen so far, obviously, we've already mentioned Kim Min-jae as a physical demon. He will set up Bayern's back line so much better. You can imagine a partnership between him and De Ligt being absolutely ridiculous. And then you've got the likes of Upamecano and Pavard to come. That is exceptional depth. Bringing in Guerrero is smart business. Really, I know Dortmund fans aren't happy about it, but it's football business at the end of the day, and they saw an opportunity. I think they were probably more annoyed with the goodbye that Guerrero gave on social media, and then he's just swamped the Bayern as quickly as you like. Obviously, Bayern signing line from RB Leipzig again weakened a rival of theirs. And then in terms of outgoings, not too much. Pavard's might be on the go. Hernandez has already left PSG. We've seen that. Sabitzer to Dortmund on the other way. I think it's what yet to come for Bayern, if I can get my words out, because there's strong thoughts and feelings that Kyle Walker's coming. And that is basically a done deal. They just need to sort out a fee. They could see Pavard go the other way. Interesting, because the age profiles of the players, they're kind of saying that Man City win out of that one. And then obviously we're kind of left it a bit late, Mark, but Harry Kane to Bayern Munich, what are we saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously from a Bundesliga perspective, it will be amazing. One of the best strikers in the world, obviously a fellow Englishman for me and Rory. It'd be fantastic to see him just down the road in Munich. Obviously, Bayern Munich need a striker as well. We know that they are going to sign a striker, that's for certain. They have to sign a striker, and they know that they're going to have to break the bank to do that. And I think, obviously, when it became the more likely options were Osimhen from Napoli and obviously Muani from Frankfurt. But I think when this kind of shock transfer of Harry Kane, which has been the saga of the summer, really, both in England and Germany, let's be honest, I think when that came available, obviously Bayern Munich are going to do absolutely everything to try and get him, and who can blame them? At first, I didn't believe it was possible because I always thought that Kane would stay in England to break the record of the Premier League goals. But I've heard a lot of inside sources, and they seem convinced that he is going to make the move over to the Bundesrepublik. But obviously, it's far from done, and there's always a chance he could have a change of heart. He's not lacking suitors, that's for sure. Pretty much every club in Europe or the world, even Saudi, quite happily have him on their books. But it does look as though Thomas Tuchel has managed to kind of ring his ear and, try and get him to come around. But the issue is money as well. I think they've already had 2 bids rejected for him, and it's already gone well over 100 million euros. And I would say they're going to have to pay probably 150, 170 if they really want to get him, even. And I'm not sure whether Bayern, a club that have traditionally kept by world standards, they've kept a kind of tight book, really, haven't they? Let's be honest, as all German teams do. German teams, they want to ensure the long-term future of the club and not jeopardize that, which is fine. But I mean, they know that they need a striker. If they want to be challenging for Champions Leagues and even Bundesligas next season, they need a top striker, which they didn't have last season. And they know that basically they put all their eggs in one basket by the look of it with Harry Kane, and they've got to break the bank to sign him. That's my opinion anyway now. I think it's too late in the day to start going in for Osimhen, who seems to have settled for another season at Napoli. And then Muani, as good as he is, would he be considered the same level as Harry Kane? I'm not sure, really.
Yeah, interesting to follow. Yeah, I mean, I think we've gone through everyone. Apologies if we missed out any team. I think we've covered everyone apart from the newly promoted sides. And like we said, we're going to be doing a proper introduction for them to the league. We haven't actually mentioned Bolcom that much. They've seen a few players leave, basically, from a defensive point of view. Lamproulos, Staphylides and Kevin Schlotterbeck. They brought in a Slovakian midfielder, Brero, and a couple of Zweite Bundesliga players. Kwarteng is quite well thought of, isn't he, Mark? And Audetz has been made a permanent signing as well. I kind of had Bolcom as at the moment a bit underwhelming personally, but we'll definitely come to them and talk about them a little bit more as well. But I think that's about as far as we can go. We've definitely kind of overspun. We didn't think we'd spend this long talking about it, but there's obviously been so much going on in the Bundesliga in terms of transfer business, and we wanted to make sure that we gave everyone their due diligence in that sense. So thank you for everyone for tuning into our first show of the season. We look forward to getting stuck into loads more in terms of preseason sense, as we mentioned, a couple of new club profiles. We're doing a prediction show, fantasy draft as well. We'll maybe look at what shows we can do as watch alongs as well. We often do the Super Cup, for example. And then, we'll let you all know where that's going on Twitter and all the various social media platforms that Over the Bar are on. In that sense, I'll hand over to you, Mark, to just close up.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed what you saw today, then check out our Twitter stream at Over the Bar FB and at Over the Bar Extra. Don't forget the main site as well, which we've been doing a little bit more work on, to otbfootball.net. And then, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So we are on the journey to 1,000, and we're hoping to get there as soon as possible in this season, because that'd really help us to produce more content. As you say, you only have to wait 3 days before our next show as well, when we've got our Darmstadt preview as well. For those of you that don't know, the new clubs, both of them will be previewed within the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. And, we're on the countdown, only 4 weeks, a little bit less than 4 weeks until the Bundesliga kicks off. Only 3 weeks until the Super Cup. So, so much to come for you guys. And, we'll be there to take you through it all. So see you guys. Ciao.
Cheers all.